This is a simplified political map of the West Bank. In this map it looks rather unified. A relatively small land that surrounds the city of Jerusalem. But in reality, the actual Palestinian-controlled areas of the West Bank are much smaller, fragmented into small patches of land administered by the Palestinian Authority, known as Area A. Palestinians also live in Area B, but this is under Israeli military control. Area C actually makes up 60% of the Palestinian land, but only has about 5 to 10% of the population. Area C is where most Israeli settlements are located, but you can find settlers in other two areas as well. But let's take a look at the main localities of Area A. This area makes up 80% of the West Bank, but contains 55% of the Palestinian population. The main cities are Jenin, Nablus, Tulkarm, Jericho, Bethlehem, Hebron and Ramallah, which serves as the de facto capital of the state of Palestine. In theory, this area is under full civil and security control of the Palestinian Authority, but in reality is also under ultimate Israeli control. Today is not controversial to say that this is an apartheid state. The position and design of the settlements clearly show how political control can become embedded in the urban fabric of the city. If we look at the physical map of the West Bank and compare it to the location of the Israeli settlements, we can see that most settlements are built on hilltops. Having a high-density urban area on top of a hill is rather unusual, but it's pretty common in the West Bank. There are multiple reasons why they are built like this. The first reason is space. The West Bank is already a densely populated area and always have been, despite what Israeli propaganda says. Because of that, unless you want to expel the existing population, which has happened in the past but it's harder to justify today, the hills are the only free areas. Another reason is safety. These settlements don't look like normal cities or towns. They look more like fortresses with clearly defined borders. Accessing them from outside is much harder than accessing a typical Palestinian city or village, and that's by design. Let's take a look at Ariel, one of the largest settlements and the administrative center of the settlements network. Ariel is located about 70 to 22 kilometers east from the Green Line and around 34 kilometers west of the Jordan River, near Jordan's western border. It lies close to the Palestinian town of Salfit or southwest of Nablus. Ariel was founded in 1978 on land seized for military purposes, as well as on land later declared as state land. This included cultivated farmland belonging to Palestinian villages in the district, along with rocky areas that villagers had used for grazing their flocks. At the beginning of 1978, a group of Israelis organized with the aim of establishing a settlement in the hills of the northern West Bank. Since then, Ariel becomes the most important Israeli settlements in the West Bank. If you look at the 3D map, we can see that the settlements dominates the landscape, since it's situated at a much higher altitude than the surrounding areas. The streets are layered, and at the edge there is a highway and a security wall, both designed to keep Palestinians from the surrounding area out. The city itself also works as a watchtower, since you can easily see the surrounding cities from it. In fact, many settlements began as a military outpost, and the local military and police are usually settlers themselves. This urbanism is actually reminiscent of the panopticon principle. The panopticon design is a prison concept created by the philosopher Jeremy Bentham in the late 18th century. Its main idea is a circular building with prison cells arranged around the edge and a central observation tower in the middle. From the tower, the guards can watch prisoners, but the prisoners cannot know when they are being watched. Because prisoners cannot tell whether they are being watched at any given moment, they start to behave as though surveillance is constant. The power of panopticon is therefore not only physical control but also psychological. The prisoner does not need to be watched all the time. It is enough that they might be watched. This uncertainty makes them regulate their own actions. They avoid breaking rules, speaking out, resisting, or acting freely because they fear possible punishment. In this way, surveillance becomes internalized. The guard's gaze is no longer only in the tower, it is also in the prisoner's mind. The prisoner becomes in a sense their own supervisor. This is why the panopticon is often seen as a model of modern power. It shows how people can be controlled not just through force, but making them feel constantly visible and judged. Today, the panopticon is often used as a metaphor for surveillance, control, visibility, and power in modern society. It is used to describe how people behave when they know they might be watched, especially in institutions, workplaces, cities, prisons, and digital environments. In most cases, it is a theoretical concept, a way of explaining how power can function without always being directly visible. But in the West Bank, this is not just a metaphor. For many Palestinians, this is a part of everyday life. Surveillance is not only symbolic or abstract. The position of the settlements on the hilltops, the presence of military outposts, watchtowers, checkpoints, walls, roads, and restricted areas creates a constant sense of being observed and controlled. Instead of placing peoples inside traditional prisons, Israel turns existing towns and villages into enclosed and monitored spaces. Movement is limited, access is controlled, and everyday life is shaped by barriers, permits, military presence, and the possibility of surveillance from above. In this sense, the urban structure itself becomes a system of control. The result is a kind of open-air prison where people continue to live their own towns and villages, but under constant restriction. The borders are not always prison walls in the usual sense, but they still define who can move, where they can go, and how freely they can live. This is why the panopticon is not only useful comparison here, it becomes a way to understand how occupation is embedded directly into the space, architecture, and daily life of Palestinians. Let's look at another example, Hebron. If you look at a map, it looks like a somewhat complex administrative division. But in reality, this division separates two people who live in a very different reality. Hebron is already divided between H1, which is under Palestinian control, and H2, which is under Israeli control. Beside that, there are two large Israeli settlements, Ramat Mamre and Kiryat Arba. If we look at the satellite map and zoom in, we can see that H1, the Palestinian side, is more densely populated. The urban fabric is somewhat more chaotic, with narrower streets, mixed-use areas, and residential buildings. The historic center looks like a typical Middle Eastern city, with narrow streets, usually pedestrian-only alleys, shops, and markets. Unfortunately, this part of the city is almost dead. Because of its proximity to the Cave of the Patriarchs, the historical center has become an important destination for hardline settlers who want to take over the city. As they move in, they try to make life impossible for the locals by throwing rocks and trash at them, blocking important arteries, and controlling who can enter or leave this part of the city. The city has pretty much become a surveillance dystopia. Every single aspect of Palestinian life is constantly monitored and controlled.
Hebron, the occupied West Bank. Hebron is a place of religious significance, which makes it a magnet for some of Israel's most extreme settlers. Palestinians in Hebron are some of the most heavily monitored and controlled people on the planet. In the military surveillance laboratory that is the occupied territories, Hebron is ground zero.
But beside the high-tech surveillance, we can also see the same panopticon-inspired urbanism. The two settlements, Givat Harsin and Kiryat Arba, are both on hilltops, places from which you can see all the surrounding cities and villages, including Hebron. The Israeli-controlled H2 area of the Hebron is also mostly on hills, but it is more integrated into the rest of the city since the population is still mostly Palestinian. That's one of the reasons why the settlers here need much more military protection. This is a good way to illustrate how crucial urbanism is in enforcing apartheid. Since only around 800 settlers live there, they need a much more sophisticated surveillance system and military presence to keep them safe. But probably the worst place for Palestinians, and the best example of the apartheid urbanism, is Jerusalem. Jerusalem has long been one of the most important cities in the region, both politically and symbolically. Before the occupation, it was central to Palestinian political, cultural and religious life, and it continues to hold an enormous importance for Palestinians today. At the same time, Jerusalem is also claimed by Israel as its capital, making the city one of the most sensitive and contested places in the conflict. Israel has placed its main governmental institution in the city, while Palestinians see East Jerusalem as the future capital and seat of power for an independent Palestinian state. After the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, the original international plan for Jerusalem was never implemented. Instead, the city was divided. The West Jerusalem came under Israeli control, while the East Jerusalem, including the Old City, came under Jordanian control. This division lasted from 1948 until 1967. During the Six-Day War, Israel captured East Jerusalem from Jordan. Since then, the entire city has been under Israeli control. However, the status of East Jerusalem remains internationally disputed. The unresolved status is one of the main reasons why Jerusalem remains at the center of Israeli-Palestinian conflict. East Jerusalem remains to this day majority Palestinian, but Israel tries to change the demographics by placing settlers around. The strategy is the same as in the other settlements: high-density housing for settlers on hilltops, accessible by roads that can only be used by Israelis. But besides this, there is also expulsions and property theft from Palestinians. That is because, in the contrast to the other settlements, here it is really important to connect all the new settlements to the old city. To connect all the settlements to the historical city while keeping Palestinians out, Jerusalem's urban planners keep diverting the main access routes to the city directly into the West Bank settler infrastructure. Some Palestinian towns has only one access route to the city, and usually those routes are heavily guarded.
In the Israeli-occupied West Bank, a group of Palestinians looks on as heavy machinery helps bury their hopes for statehood. Surrounded by armed security guards, Israeli machinery carves up the land near the village of Beitar al-Faqwa to create new routes for Jewish settlements. Ashraf Samara is a member of the village council and says the construction is creating new barriers to movement for Palestinians. A 2004 report from Israeli rights group B'Tselem described this network of roads and bypasses to settlements built over several decades as, quote, Israel's discriminatory road regime. The group said some roads aimed to place a physical barrier to stifle Palestinian urban development.
Other parts of the city that are closer to the historical center are subject to massive expropriations. For Palestinians, it is almost impossible to get a building permit. Here, it is also common to place settlers directly inside Palestinian neighborhoods. The buildings are usually much taller, and often they have role of a watchtower. So the panopticon design is also used here, but on a much smaller scale. Pretty much every street in the Palestinian neighborhood has at least one settler building, which gives a good excuse to increase the military presence in the area. But I'm pretty sure that some of you already have at least a basic understanding of the situation in occupied Palestine. So why it is important to also understand how urbanism plays a role in this. because these problems won't simply disappear even if the occupation ends. The way cities are built can shape people's life for generations. That's why it is important to understand how the built environment can affect our daily life, our freedom of movement, and even our sense of security. The built-in inequalities inside Palestine will take a long time to undo, even in the best case scenario, and that's why it is very important to be aware of them. Thank you for watching my video. This was a bit more political than usual, but I think it's very important to pay attention to what's happening in this region of the world. So if you like my video, please subscribe, and have a nice day.